It's The Law Show on CL 650. A comprehensive look at everything you need to know about the law. Now, here's Sterling Fox.
And welcome to the Law Show here on CIL 650. A pleasure to have you with us today. In studio, we are joined by our friends from Murphy Batista, LLP, Vancouver personal injury law firm. Joe Murphy and Alex Wittgenstein are with us this morning. Good morning, gentlemen.
Good morning.
Alex, welcome to the Law Show for the very first time. Tell us a little bit about yourself. You're an Ontario guy who came to BC to go to school, and like a lot of Ontario people, myself included, never went back.
That's right. I was born and raised in Ottawa. Then, after doing a bit of school in Montreal, headed out to Vancouver to go to law school. The initial intention was to go back and practice law and live the rest of my life in Ottawa. But once I was here, there was no going back, and ended up articling in Vancouver, and that's been 20 years now.
Right. And how long have you been with Murphy Batista, Alex?
I've been with them for 4 years. Before that, I worked with a very well-regarded litigation defense firm.
Okay.
Doing a lot of medical malpractice work and other general liability type of work, including acting for municipalities and such.
So after all of those years of working in a defense capacity, what persuaded you to cross the road and work for the other team?
Well, it's funny, when you're on the defense side, you refer to the plaintiff side as the dark side.
Okay.
And when you're on the plaintiff side, you refer to the defense side as the dark side.
No surprise there.
There is a real difference, though. There are very good people that I worked with on when I acted for the defense, but there's a very big difference in who you are acting for.
Sure.
Even if the person that you're directly dealing with is a nice person, ultimately they're working for a large multinational in most cases that's really only interested in saving money. Mm-hmm. When you work on the plaintiff side, you're actually working for individuals, and you're working to make a real difference in their lives in situations where they've been often significantly injured, and you're the only one that can help them get the compensation that they need to bring their lives back to close to what it once was.
So I would imagine, Alex, on a personal satisfaction level, much more so working for the plaintiffs than working for the defense.
Absolutely. The defense side does, however, that experience forms a great foundation for doing the work now on the plaintiff side. And you'll find that many lawyers, for instance, at Murphy Batista have an initial background on the defense, so we learn how things work on the other side, and it's really helps a lot when working for our clients.
I have, in fact, learned that, Alex, and I've also come to learn it's not by accident at all. Joe Murphy, founding partner of Murphy Batista. The firm goes back to the 80s. You and Joe Batista, just the two of you and a couple of assistants, started in a small downtown office space, and now, over the years, you can tell us about how it's expanded and to what extent, but you and Joe Batista have very carefully cherry-picked really talented young people to join your staff, most of whom, or many of whom, have come from what Alex just called the dark side. They've worked for the other team, and after observing them, and they've approached you and you them, why have the two of you gone to such great extents to do that, Joe, to cherry-pick those teammates that you've assembled over the years?
Sterling, I was really fortunate in law school, although a lot of people thought it was a bad idea. I worked as an insurance adjuster while I went through law school.
Okay.
Law school's 3 hours a day of classes, and I worked 5 hours a day as an insurance adjuster. And I learned far more in those 5 hours of doing than in the 3 hours of listening. So when I graduated from law school, I had this experience working with a private company that preceded ICBC. Mm-hmm. And it just gave me such an insight and understanding of how insurance companies operate, how they think, how you deal with insurance companies. And that led into me doing this. When I graduated from law school, I began probably 50% of my practice was doing injury cases because the firm I was with had a bunch, and they said, well, here, you seem to know how to do these, you do them.
Right.
And over time, it grew from 50% to 70 to 80 to 90. And it's been 100% now for quite some time.
How many attorneys in the firm these days in the fall of 2015, Joe?
17, about to become 18. We have a support staff of about 65 people. We started out with 2 lawyers, Joe Batista and I, and 2 secretaries.
Right. Early 80s, right?
January 1982. The interest rates were 19%. I remember it well. Businesses were closing, not opening.
That's right.
This was quite unusual. And the bank kept on saying, how are you guys ever going to survive? But we did more than that. But we went from 2 lawyers, 2 secretaries, to 17 lawyers now and 60 support staff. We have an office in downtown Vancouver. We have a full floor of one of the big towers. Mm-hmm. We have an office recently opened in Kelowna.
That's right, yeah.
And we have a resource center that operates beside GF Strong that's there to help people that need help.
Okay.
So it's come a long way. The philosophy of the firm always was not to grow. We didn't want to grow. We wanted to stay small and just simply work on the quality of the work we did for the clients. We didn't advertise. When the Yellow Pages were popular, you couldn't find us in the Yellow Pages because that's not how we got our clients. We got them by doing good work, and then other work came in. But over time, the amount of work we had got larger and larger and larger, and we needed to bring in people to do that.
Sure.
So in looking to add those people, I've always known it's so important that they have that background in the defense because they know how the insurance companies operate, how they think, how to deal with them. And, of course, also people that were really interested in working with people. You know, our clients are people as opposed to an insurance company on the other side.
Right.
So there's got to be the real concern and real drive to help these people who come in the door after some terrible tragedy has happened.
We're going to talk about concussions and brain injuries on this program, but just before we dive into that end of the pool, Joe, let me ask you about advertising, because you just brought it up a couple of seconds ago. In previous years, right up until quite recently, Murphy Batista did not advertise at all. In fact, no law firms advertised much. What are the rules now regarding advertising and law firms in BC? Because now, for the first time for many of us, we're starting to see ads on TV, on the radio, for law firms that weren't there as recently as a couple of years ago.
Well, Sterling, the history of lawyer advertising in BC is interesting because it began with a little firm in North Van that hung a board outside its little office, and it said, we charge so much for wills and we charge so much for whatever. They had a little shopping list, so much for conveyance of property.
A rate card, huh?
And the Law Society sued them, saying, you can't do that. And that case went all the way to the Supreme Court of Canada. And at the time when I was watching this, and I was a junior lawyer, I thought, what's wrong with telling people how much they have to pay for something?
Right.
If I go into a store, I want to know what the price is.
And it's no problem finding it in a store, is it?
Well, I just thought, why are we fighting this? If anything, this should be encouraged so that people know what they're getting and what they're paying.
Absolutely. So
that began it. And many years ago, there was huge ads in the Yellow Pages, huge, full page, half page. And the personal injury lawyers probably filled 30 pages in the Vancouver Yellow Pages. Mm-hmm. Now that sort of shifted to bus stops, to TV. And I always say to people, if a firm is really good and does good work, why do they need to go on TV? So I think that's very telling. We don't go on TV because we have a large volume of work that comes to us because we're known to do good work, and we get work from clients, we get work from people in the medical community who say, go and talk to these lawyers.
Exactly, yeah.
The referral network is huge, but it's based, again, on the quality of the work we do, not on the advertising budget we spend on TV.
You left me kind of hanging here. What did the Supreme Court rule on that silly little sign, the rate card in West Vancouver?
Well, logically, they said there's nothing wrong with telling people what they pay for a service.
Oh, okay. So they did come down on a common sense ruling.
Law Society spent a fortune on it, and I just thought this is so misguided.
Right.
You know, if I go into a store and there's a sweater there, I want to know what the price is.
Sure.
So what's wrong with putting a board up saying a will is X dollars, a conveyance land's Y dollars? I never understood that. But in the end, the Supreme Court of Canada said this can be done. And in the initial years, that was mostly Yellow Page ads.
Okay. And, of course, the Yellow Pages are just, well, kind of out of style right now more than anything else, aren't they?
Yes.
Let's talk about the focal point of our program today, gentlemen. We're talking about concussions and brain injuries, and good to have a couple of experienced personal injury lawyers here to talk about it. And, Joe Murphy, let me start with you. What's the difference, if any, between a concussion and a brain injury?
There is none. A concussion is what's considered a mild traumatic brain injury. It's a different label, but it's the same thing.
Okay. So a concussion, we typically, if we're sort of not thinking about it, we typically would associate a concussion with one of two things: a car accident or a sporting event of some kind. Those would be, I think, in terms of the majority mindset, the most likely milieus in which these would occur, right?
Well, it is. Slip and falls can sometimes lead to concussions.
Sure.
But mostly it's sporting activities, motor vehicle accidents, wherever you get a force that's hard enough or great enough to shake the brain up, because that's what a concussion is. The brain gets shaken up. The brain's locked inside the skull. So the skull's very good at protecting the brain, but it's also the part that injures the brain when there's a shaking, because there's nowhere for the brain to go except slamming against the inside of the skull.
Is there a legal definition in terms of these concussions or mild brain injuries that you rely on, you and Alex and the rest of your team, when you go to court?
There's a number of medical definitions, and that's really what it comes down to. This is medical evidence.
Okay.
When you go to court, you have to generally call doctors, and they say this person suffered these injuries in this accident, and the same for a brain injury, although there's been a lot of controversy over the last 10, 15 years by the insurance companies saying, no, this never happened. And the standard thing is, well, if he wasn't knocked out, he can't have a brain injury. And there used to be doctors that actually believed that. And that's now known to be not the case. Most people aren't knocked out, but you can maintain your consciousness but still have a concussion, which leaves you stunned, confused. You may not remember all of the events. That's the standard concussion.
In a sporting context, Alex, you hear of the expression is, oh boy, sure had your bell rung out there. Boy, they leveled you with that tackle, didn't they? I bet you they rang your bell and you get up and you're kind of seeing stars and your ears are buzzing, and that's a concussion, isn't it? Yep. Plain and simple. That event that just happened was a concussion of some degree.
Right, and just like there's been a lot of progress in understanding of concussions within the courts, there's also been a lot of progress made in the sporting situation, where now you see that there's all sorts of concussion protocols that most leagues have put into place to make sure that person, if they looks like they have a suspected concussion, does not immediately go back on the field, because we know one of the more important things to do if you have a concussion is that you then need to rest and not aggravate the situation by maintaining activity.
Joe, is one of the reasons the National Hockey League and football and all of these other pro sports that Alex has just talked about, is one of the reasons that they're now officially recognizing this issue and addressing it, is it financial? Are they being sued? Are they having their pants sued off and finally deciding, gosh, we better do something or we're going to be in real financial difficulty?
It is financial, but it's also a recognition that if you've got a player and they get hurt, they've got to recover from that concussion before you put them back on the field or on the ice. So but it all boils down to financial. The NFL is being sued by players.
Former players, that's right.
Former players. It's a class action. There was a settlement of about $800 million that went before the judge, and he looked at it and said, this is not enough because it excludes so many players. And we read in the paper every few weeks or months of another NFL player retired who commits suicide, and these people have this progressive brain disease. One of them shot himself not in the head but in the chest, with instructions that his brain be examined afterwards, and not surprisingly, he was found to have this progressive brain deterioration. Football is very, very dangerous. You just watch how the collisions occur in football. Right. And it is so violent. And it doesn't matter what helmet you've got, your brain is being bounced off the inside of the skull. And that's what causes the injury in a concussion. It's not so much the head being hit, but it's the brain within the skull being move back and forth, shaken violently back and forth.
And Alex, I guess the good thing about these protocols that the pro sports leagues you talked about a moment ago have adopted is that it's also filtering down through the ranks to the amateur level. So where on the soccer field on a Sunday morning, the kids take a shot and they have to go sit down now. And one of the coaches has to do the concussion test. And so it's starting to, I think more and more of us are starting to be more sensitive to the whole concussion issue, don't you?
I agree, and that I think also filters into areas other than just within the sporting community.
Of course,
but
right.
Where people then who have been involved in accidents may now look a little bit with more concern about the impacts, and I think I just got my bell rung and realize that maybe this is something a bit more than that, and that you're not being a wimp by complaining about the fact that your head is ringing after the accident, and maybe you should have it looked at by a doctor.
Well, that's a really good point, too, because this kind of is a macho code, especially in sports, which is, you get up and you tough it out and, come on, just let me back in, coach. I'm good. I'm fine. Don't worry about it. I mean, that all has been proven to be so wrong, Joe, for so long now. It's finally starting to go away, and don't you think it's about time?
Well, Sterling, it's now known that putting someone who hasn't recovered from a concussion back into play is incredibly dangerous because they're at a huge risk for a second concussion on top of the first.
Right.
And it's a case where it's one concussion plus one concussion, but the total is not 2, it's 5 in terms of the effect on a person. And if that happens a number of times, that is, you go back before you've recovered, the person is likely left with significant lifelong deficits, and that's a disaster.
The subject of the program on The Law Show today is brain injuries and concussions, and our guests in studio from Murphy Batista LLP, Joe Murphy and Alex Wittgenstein. I'm Sterling Fox, and there's plenty more ahead. Stay with us here on CIL 650.
There's more of the show still ahead. This is The Law Show on CIL